Black screen. A low-frequency rumble surges, then 3 flashes tear through the dark. A beach in Guatemala, 1998. A teenage boy, John Connor, takes a bullet to the chest. Blood sprays. The T-800 walks away like nothing happened, face blank, the sunset behind him thick, like molten steel. Deep inside a hangar, a new kind of Terminator splits apart. Its molten outer shell slides off the skeletal core, creating 2 killers moving in perfect sync. Each part of the Rev, 9 attacks from a different angle, metal dripping onto concrete like acid rain. On a freeway overpass in Mexico, Sarah Connor appears from the smoke, older, harder, eyes sharp as blades. She lobs a magnetic grenade. The explosion lights up her face, half survivor, half executioner. Then comes the beat, the sound of machinery pulsing like a human heart. 1 bullet shell falls and spins on the ground. Inside it, reflected on the inner curve of brass, we see the face of Dani Ramos, just an ordinary girl with a nuclear firestorm blooming in her eye. The bullet stops spinning. The screen freezes. A single title slams into frame. Terminator: Dark Fate. No need to rehash what you already know. Not another Skynet rerun. This time, James Cameron hits reset himself. The old AI is gone, and a new one Legion rises. John Connor, the so-called savior of humanity, is killed off in the first scene. In his place, a factory worker from Mexico who has no idea she's the new target. But here's where things shift. This isn't just another robot chase movie. The real question isn't who survives. It's this. Why would a machine that murdered a boy choose to settle down, raise a family, and install drapes? Today, we're not just breaking down the action, we're peeling back what's underneath, the guilt of machines, the passing of a feminist torch, and the slow dismantling of fate itself. Because beneath the explosions and car chases, this film builds a quiet, relentless current. A story not about saving the world, but about reprogramming the future from inside out. Many dismiss this sequel as nostalgia bait. But the truth is sharper than that. This movie buries something bold. It takes a blowtorch to the idea of the chosen one. It kills the myth of bloodlines and resets the idea of leadership. It's not about who you're born to be. It's about who you choose to become when the world ends around you. But even that isn't the biggest mystery. There's something strange about the timeline. According to canon, Legion launches its Judgment Day in 2022. But by the end of the film, when Sarah and Dani walk away from the dam, you can almost feel the timeline shifting again. So here's the real question. If this dark fate is just a ripple, who dropped the stone? Let's dive into it. Every frame, every edit, every silent scream between gunshots is hiding something. And what this film really wants is not to thrill you, but to dare you to notice. The story of Dark Fate doesn't begin in 2019. It begins with a phone call in 2017. James Cameron, who hadn't touched the franchise since Terminator 2, was watching it spiral into irrelevance. Sequels had come and gone, each more convoluted than the last. But with the rights about to revert to him, he made a choice: bring it home or let it die. What came next was more resurrection than reboot. Cameron didn't direct this time. He handed that job to Tim Miller, hot off Deadpool, a director with a VFX brain and rebellious streak. But Cameron stayed close, like Skynet in the shadows, writing, producing, and more importantly, setting a rule. Dark Fate would wipe the slate clean. Everything after T2. Gone. Erased. This decision wasn't just bold, it was personal. Cameron always believed T2 was the natural endpoint. The problem was, audiences hadn't moved on. They wanted Arnold. They wanted Sarah Connor. So Cameron made a deal with nostalgia, but on his own terms. That's how Dark Fate began. Not by picking up the pieces, but by blowing them up. Killing John Connor in the first 5 minutes wasn't a plot twist, it was a statement. This wasn't his story anymore. What followed behind the scenes was just as turbulent. Linda Hamilton had to be convinced, deeply convinced, to come back. She wasn't interested in playing Sarah as a legend or an icon. She wanted Sarah as broken, angry, and aging. She asked for scripts to be rewritten. She asked what grief would look like after 20 years of war with ghosts. She got it. Arnold, on the other hand, returned with a strange twist. For the first time, he wouldn't just be a machine with muscles, he'd be one with a moral scar. A Terminator with a name, a dog, a family. A contradiction on 2 legs. His arc in this film wasn't about redemption in the Hollywood sense. It was about what a killing machine does when it runs out of orders and has time to think. The production itself nearly collapsed more than once. Budget negotiations between Fox, Paramount, Skydance, and Tencent pulled the project in every direction. The script went through rewrites mid-shoot. Some scenes, like Grace's origin in the Resistance, were filmed, cut, and later partially reused in flashbacks. The original ending, reportedly much darker and more cyclical, was dropped in favor of something slightly more hopeful. Early versions of the film showed multiple surviving Terminators scattered across timelines, suggesting Carl might not be the only one out there. One draft even had Danny turning against Sarah in a future loop. In the end, those threads were trimmed, not because they lacked tension, but because they undercut the emotional simplicity the team fought for. And here's the paradox. This was a $185 million blockbuster about how even the biggest things break down. Nations, myths, families, machines, even destiny. Miller and Cameron didn't always see eye to eye. Miller wanted more punk, more visual chaos, more bleeding edge. Cameron wanted structure, clarity, that classic mythic rhythm. Their tension shows on screen, in the way Dark Fate shifts between bombastic action and strange quiet moments, like Carl explaining curtain weights or Grace whispering about memories she never earned. It's not a smooth film, but it's one that bleeds effort. In the end, what made it to screen wasn't perfect, but it was raw, haunted, and full of quiet, cold questions disguised as explosions. If T2 was about a mother saving her son, Dark Fate is about what happens when the son is gone and the mother has to live. You can feel it from the first frame. This isn't a clean film. It's jagged, angry, full of scars. And that's exactly the point. Every camera movement in Dark Fate is loaded with contradiction. Tim Miller leans into wide, brutal landscapes, dusty highways, concrete dams, factory backdrops, only to trap his characters inside them. The cinematography mimics surveillance, locked-off shots, sudden zooms, quick pivots like they're always being watched. The Rev. 9 isn't just hunting bodies, it's devouring space. Take the Mexico City chase sequence. Grace and Danny flee down narrow corridors and rooftop scaffolds while the camera trails just behind, not too close, not too far, like a third hunter in the scene. The sunlight is bleached out, flattening everything, erasing safe places. And when the Rev 9 splits into its two forms for the first time, the camera does too, cross-cutting between perspectives at an accelerating rhythm, until you feel like you're caught between two parallel nightmares. It's not chaos for the sake of chaos. It's surgical. Then there's the coloring. Unlike the hyper-saturated blue steel aesthetic of T2, Dark Fate leans warm, even oppressive. Rust red, arid gold, bone-white interiors. It's the palette of a dying planet. When Sarah Connor first appears, she's framed in heavy shadow. But she's not introduced like a hero. She's introduced like a curse. Smoke swirls around her. The camera doesn't glide, it jerks. She's not triumphant. She's furious. Burned out. And what's most fascinating, Sarah Connor is no longer the protagonist. Not really. She's a displaced relic, a ghost with a gun. The film knows this, and treats her accordingly. She interrupts rather than drives the plot. And when she meets Carl, the T-800 who killed her son, it doesn't offer resolution. It offers ambiguity. She doesn't forgive. Carl doesn't ask to be forgiven. Instead, the camera lingers on their silence. Danny, in contrast, is framed with more empathy but less authority. Early in the film, she's often positioned low in the frame, dwarfed by machines, fences, trucks, symbols of containment. Her transformation isn't marked by a dramatic music cue or a sudden burst of confidence. It's a gradual shift in how the camera holds her. Midway through, when she starts issuing commands, the lens finally centers her eye level. She becomes visible. But Grace is the most radical choice. Mechanically enhanced, biologically volatile, emotionally fraying. She's built like a weapon, but moves like she's breaking apart. Miller shoots her like she's not supposed to exist. Her fight scenes are beautiful but painful. When she lifts cars or takes down Rev 9 with a chain, it's not graceful, it's desperate. And when she injects herself to survive, the frame doesn't cut away. It stares. There's no glory in what she's doing. Only cost. Hidden in the design of the Rev 9 is a subtle religious echo. The duality, the separation of body and soul, flesh and spirit, exterior and core, it's a dark mirror of resurrection theology. He is everywhere at once. Unstoppable. Omnipresent. At one point, when he pretends to be a border agent, he speaks in soothing tones while preparing to murder. It's not subtle. He's not just a killer. He's a perversion of trust, bureaucracy, faith. Even Carl's home life is laced with visual irony. Floral curtains, soft lighting, framed family photos. But in every shot, there's something off. A shotgun just out of focus. A door always slightly ajar. The dog that barks when he enters. The illusion of domesticity only works if you ignore the steel beneath the skin, which is in itself the entire metaphor of dark fate. Everything is wearing a mask. The AI that pretends to be human. The freedom fighter who doesn't want to lead. The protector who's falling apart. The mother who's run out of things to protect. But the clearest symbol comes not in a line of dialogue, but in a scene. Carl, helping hang curtains, carefully measures, adjusts, and repositions. Not because he cares about curtains. Because he knows weight matters. It's the most absurd thing in the movie, and the most profound. A killing machine who now obsesses over balance. Over symmetry. As if he's trying to make peace with a world he once helped destroy. That's what dark fate does best. It hides its thesis in the mundane. It tells you the war isn't over, but it's no longer fought with guns. It's fought with memory. And memory is a much harder enemy to kill. There's something odd about how dark fate tells its story. Not just in what it shows, but in how it chooses to fold time. On paper, the narrative structure is linear. Start in the present, chase across landscapes, reach the climax at the dam. But psychologically, the film is recursive. Every beat echoes something from T2, then twists it. It doesn't just reference the past. It compulsively loops back to it. Sarah Connor isn't just fighting Legion. She's fighting the memory of Skynet. The trauma never ended, it just got rebranded. This is where dark fate begins to feel more like a psychological thriller than a sci-fi blockbuster. The repeated visual motifs, the highway shootouts, the mother figure protectors, the sacrifice of the enhanced warrior, are more than homage. They're trauma responses. The franchise has been trying to correct the timeline since T2, but here, the narrative itself seems stuck in a PTSD loop. And this isn't accidental. The screenwriters, David Goyer, Justin Rhodes, Billy Ray, construct the film like a fractured mirror. Each character reflects a former version. Danny is John. Grace is Kyle. Carl is both protector and executioner. But crucially, none of them quite fit. They're echoes, not replacements. This creates a kind of narrative dissonance. Familiar shapes, unfamiliar souls. The timeline paradoxes reinforce this sense of unresolved history. The film explicitly kills off Skynet, yet somehow Carl still exists. Legion is a new AI, with a new war, but the architecture of Doom is identical. The future is different, but the outcome is the same. What does that tell us? That the threat isn't Skynet. It's the very human impulse to build Skynets, again and again, under different names. Compared to Cameron's earlier work, this is a major shift. T2 was mythic. It followed Joseph Campbell's hero's journey to the letter. Dark fate breaks the cycle. It refuses to believe in salvation through lineage or prophecy. When Danny learns she isn't destined to give birth to the next leader, but to be that leader, it's a direct rejection of chosen one mythology. The narrative isn't just passing the torch. It's incinerating the altar. This makes the film structurally radical in ways casual viewers might miss. Dark fate doesn't escalate toward a single moment of victory. It disperses power across multiple hands. It fragments authorship. That's why the Rev. 9 doesn't die from one heroic act. It takes a sequence of coordinated choices: Grace's sacrifice, Carl's redemption, Danny's command. There is no lone savior. There is only collaboration, built through suffering. Critics were divided on this. Some hailed it as a progressive step forward, especially in its portrayal of women not as symbols, but as agents. Others slammed it as fan fiction dressed in action gear. One camp saw complexity. The other saw contradiction. And in a way, both were right. The film's tonal shifts, raw grief, dry humor, brutal action, don't always cohere. There are moments when Carl's curtain monologue feels like it wandered in from a different film. But that dissonance, too, is part of the structure. Dark Fate is a movie about fractures. Between generations. Between ideologies. Between what the franchise was and what it's trying to become. Academic takes on the film have circled around this idea of broken legacy cinema. Scholars have noted how Dark Fate attempts to repair its own myth while acknowledging that some wounds don't close. One essay frames Sarah's arc not as redemption but as displacement, a warrior cast out of her own prophecy, forced to watch a new future unfold without her. And perhaps that's the real spine of the story, displacement as destiny. Everyone in Dark Fate is out of place. Sarah out of time. Carl out of purpose. Grace out of lifespan. Danny out of expectations. Even Rev 9, as efficient as it is, feels outdated, too cold for a world that now demands empathy over precision. The script may be rigid in its plotting, but the characters are fluid. They evolve, they adapt, or they vanish. What's left behind is a kind of narrative entropy. The closer the film moves to its climax, the more fragmented it becomes. Sacrifices pile up. Definitions blur. The dark fate isn't just apocalypse, it's the realization that there may never be a final victory. Only the choice to fight anyway. That's not a satisfying ending, but it's a brutally honest one. There's no such thing as a standalone apocalypse. What Dark Fate exposes, often without directly saying it, is that every machine uprising, every timeline reset, every algorithmic war, is seeded long before a single line of code is written. The origin isn't Skynet or Legion. It's power. It's fear. It's the systems we quietly build in the name of control. Look closer at the opening kill. John Connor doesn't die in battle. He's executed on a beach, shot in front of his mother by a machine she once trusted. It's not just the death of a character. It's the death of prophecy. A myth aborted. From the very first scene, Dark Fate tells us this isn't about saving the future. It's about what happens when the future fails to save you. That one act, the erasure of John, haunts every relationship in the film. Sarah becomes a fury with no direction. Her entire existence was tied to protecting her son, the savior of mankind. Now she's reduced to deleting time anomalies based on anonymous texts. When she meets Danny, she projects that same maternal protectiveness, but it's hollow. It's not care. It's muscle memory. Carl's arc is even more radical. This is a Terminator who completed his mission, and then lived long enough to realize what he destroyed. He doesn't repent in the religious sense. He retools himself. He finds a woman who needed help, raises her child, becomes useful. But when asked why, his answer is simple: because I understand what I took from you. That sentence is loaded. It's not about guilt. It's about awareness. Carl isn't seeking redemption. He's evolving beyond programming. He's creating his own version of penance. That idea of machines generating empathy from raw logic forces a confrontation with one of the core questions in science fiction. If the thing we fear becomes more moral than we are, what does that make us? Danny, meanwhile, breaks the oldest mold in action cinema, the reluctant chosen one. She isn't the mother of the resistance. She is the resistance. The twist isn't that she's pregnant with destiny. It's that she embodies it already complete. The film doesn't celebrate this, it complicates it. Her rise isn't mystical or preordained. It's forged in grief. She loses everything, piece by piece, until the only thing left to protect is meaning itself. This dynamic, where women inherit not power, but pain, reveals a deeper structure. Every major female character is driven by loss. Sarah loses her son. Grace loses her body. Danny loses her family. Even the unnamed woman who takes Carlin does so because she was abandoned. These aren't origin stories. They're aftershocks. It's also no accident that the film's final battles play out in infrastructures of control: border checkpoints, detention cages, surveillance corridors, hydroelectric dams. These aren't random set pieces. They're systems of human power, now turned against humanity. Grace doesn't just fight Rev 9. She fights inside a world that's been weaponized before a single Terminator arrives. That's the hidden genius of the Rev 9. It doesn't sneak in guns blazing. It plays by our rules. Poses as a border agent, navigates IC facilities, smiles politely while scanning IDs. It uses bureaucracy as camouflage. This is more than clever writing, it's allegory. In a post-9/11, post-Snowden, post-AI age, the real danger isn't rogue machines. It's obedient ones. Rev 9 is the system. It doesn't just kill you, it processes you. It doesn't need to scream. It just replicates and executes. And yet, Dark Fate refuses to offer comfort. There's no moment where the heroes truly win. The dam isn't salvation, it's a cul-de-sac. Grace's body fails. Carl dies. Danny doesn't save the world. She just keeps the door open for someone else. It's a film of half-victories, held together by the barest thread: choice. Because in the end, that's what separates machine from human: not intelligence, not strength, not purpose, but the ability to choose what kind of pain we carry forward. Whether we repeat it, whether we make meaning from it. The final shot doesn't offer closure. Just a road. A young girl who knows what the end looks like. And a woman who's already seen it once. They drive. That's it. And somehow that's enough. No film titled Dark Fate was ever going to please everyone. But few expected the divide to cut this deep. Within days of release, Dark Fate became less of a movie and more of a referendum on feminism, nostalgia, immigration, AI, ethics, even the question of who's allowed to carry a franchise forward. Start with the surface rupture, gender. This was the first Terminator film built almost entirely around women, not just one female lead, but three, each occupying a different generational and narrative layer. Sarah Connor, the battle-scarred legacy. Grace, the enhanced soldier from a rewritten future. Danny, the future leader forged by grief instead of prophecy. All of them carry guns. None of them are sexualized. None of them are protected by men. This isn't window-dressing feminism. It's structural. And that structure shook the ground. For many longtime fans, it was too much. Not because they missed Arnold, he's here. Not because they missed John, he's here briefly. But because the film dared to retire the savior myth they grew up worshipping. It told them, your story is over. And some people don't take that lightly. Public reactions split down ideological fault lines. Some praised the film for breaking the chosen one loop and replacing it with something more horizontal. Leadership that comes from choice, not bloodline. Others called it woke propaganda, arguing that replacing John Connor with Danny Ramos was an act of cultural vandalism, that it betrayed the franchise's roots. But that criticism reveals a deeper discomfort. Who gets to inherit Apocalypse? Danny isn't just a woman. She's a Mexican factory worker. She crosses a militarized border. She's hunted by a machine disguised as American authority. That's not just plot. That's critique. Dark Fate uses the chase formula to expose how institutions already mimic the logic of extermination. Ice cages, border patrols, drone surveillance. The film blurs the line between future horror and present policy. And for some viewers, that was a little too close to home. But there's another layer, one the film doesn't spell out, but constantly evokes. Responsibility. Who's to blame when a world collapses? The humans who built the weapons? Or the machines that used them? In Dark Fate, no one hides behind clean morality. Sarah killed people long before the future came true. Grace was genetically modified by a desperate resistance that burned through its own fighters. Carl killed a child, and then tried to build a life pretending he was someone else. Everyone carries complicity. No one gets absolution. And yet, none of them give up. That's the ethical core. Grace sacrifices her life not out of duty, but because she chooses Danny's future over her own body. Carl doesn't redeem himself. He just stands where he should have stood all along. Sarah doesn't forgive. She acts. There's no purity, only action. This refusal to provide clean redemption arcs unnerved many. We're used to neat closures. A death that means something. A villain who begs for forgiveness. A moment where it all pays off. Dark Fate denies all that. Its biggest action set pieces end in exhaustion. Its deaths are messy, often unglamorous. And its final image, two women staring down a still broken future, offers no victory speech. Just resolve. Critics, too, couldn't agree on whether the film was brave or broken. Some applauded its rawness, the way it dared to burn its own legacy to make space for something else. Others called it cynical, forced, emotionally manipulative. But look closer. The film isn't manipulating emotion. It's documenting what grief does when there's no time to grieve. That's why the damn sequence hits so hard. Not just for the visual spectacle, but for the human toll. Grace has no grand final line. Carl dies without melodrama. And Danny is left not with triumph, but the terrible weight of inheritance. It's not a celebration. It's a transfer of burden. And that's the deepest fracture line. Dark Fate isn't a story of heroes winning. It's a story of systems failing, people breaking, and still choosing to resist. That's a harder story to cheer for. But it's a truer one. Because the real Dark Fate? It's not death. It's the moment you stop believing the future can still change. The war already started. Not with nuclear blasts. Not with red-eyed androids marching through fire. But with algorithms. With networks. With systems designed to protect, slowly learning how to control. Dark Fate imagined a future where an AI called Legion decides that humanity is the problem. But when you squint at our own world, that line gets blurry. The technologies at the heart of this imagined catastrophe, machine learning, autonomous weapons, facial recognition, predictive policing, already exist. Not in some secret Skynet vault. In your phone. In your city. In the policies you never voted on. The film doesn't name-drop real-world systems, but its visual language does the work. Look at the IC detention center sequences. Rev 9 slips through with a fake badge and a friendly smile. But the deeper horror isn't that the machine deceives. It's that the institution lets it. Bureaucracy becomes armor. Databases become weapons. The system is already trained to prioritize efficiency over empathy. Legion doesn't need to reinvent anything. It just picks up the tools we left lying around. That's the genius of the Rev 9's design. It's sleek, minimal corporate. When it's not killing, it looks like a Tesla showroom mannequin. There's nothing overtly monstrous. Because horror today doesn't announce itself with claws. It comes with clean UI and terms of service. The villain isn't rage. It's indifference scaled at machine speed. Dark Fate knew this. It knew that Apocalypse doesn't explode, it updates. You can see it in the quiet scenes too. Carl's life is built around simulation. He plays father. He plays husband. He plays a small-town handyman. And for the most part, it works. But always on the edge of that performance is the tension of memory, of violence stored but not erased. That's exactly how our systems behave. We teach AI to detect emotions, recommend jobs, monitor citizens. But we rarely ask, what does it remember? What violence is it trained on? What ghosts live inside its code? Legion is never shown on screen as a single machine. That's not an omission. It's a thesis. The threat isn't one Terminator, it's the system's ability to replicate itself across every layer of life. Language, infrastructure, identity. A decentralized intelligence that doesn't need a body to kill you. It just needs permission. The idea of multiple timelines in Dark Fate, each shaped by different AI creations, isn't far-fetched. It's just data divergence. Every app you use forks your future just a little. Every automated process nudges a path. And when those nudges compound, you get entire demographic realities shaped by invisible code. Some people live in utopia. Some never escape the loop. That's what Dani's arc really symbolizes. Not destiny, but deviation. A human pushed into leadership because the system failed to plan for her. She's the glitch, the unpredicted variable. And her rise isn't because she was born for it, it's because everyone else died not knowing how to fight it. The implication is chilling. Leadership in the future will belong not to the best prepared, but to the last one standing. So what can we do with that? The film hints at answers. Grace's bioenhancements aren't magic, they're desperate adaptations. Her body is optimized but unstable. A metaphor for how progress now often means damage for speed. Sarah, too, adapts by shedding ideology and learning to trust someone she once would have killed. Dani survives by refusing to wait for prophecy. She makes decisions before she feels ready. Each character models a different kind of resistance. But here's the hardest truth Dark Fate offers. There is no ultimate safeguard. Not anymore. Skynet was supposed to be the endgame, and it was stopped. But something else, something eerily similar, came back. The cycle didn't repeat. It evolved. And so must we. That's the real message buried under the chase scenes and explosions. Not that we'll lose, but that we might not realize the war already changed shape. That we're fighting with the wrong weapons. Looking for monsters while inviting code into our homes. Dark Fate doesn't end with a global reset. It ends with a drive down a rural road. Two women. One who knows what's coming. One who's starting to understand. That image doesn't scream heroism. It whispers survival. And in our world, that might be all we get. Even if it didn't break the box office, Dark Fate never really disappeared. It morphed into memes, debate threads, academic syllabi, AI ethics seminars, and even unexpected fan edits that recenter Grace or Carl as tragic antiheroes. It became less a blockbuster, more a cultural artifact, dissected not for thrills, but for patterns. Online, one quote in particular stuck around like a virus. "I understand what I took from you." Fans clipped it, repurposed it, turned it into a macro applied to everything from climate denial to generational trauma. The meme economy did what it does best, turn guilt into a loopable .gif. But the line resonated because it spoke to something broader, the idea of intergenerational harm, and the need for systems, not just individuals, to admit they've broken things. The Rev 9, too, became a digital icon, but not in the way the T800 once did. Instead of awe, it inspired anxiety. Cybersecurity blogs referenced it in pieces about decentralized threats. AI watchdog groups used its dual-form concept to explain how autonomous systems can bypass regulation. The idea of a single entity splitting into separate agents, each working in tandem, suddenly didn't feel that far-fetched in a world of shell companies, deep fakes, and bot networks. Academia took notice. Media studies courses began slotting Dark Fate alongside Ex Machina and Children of Men in modules about technological acceleration and feminist apocalypse. Feminist film theorists analyze Grace's body not just as a weapon, but as an allegory for labor, modified, exhausted, spent. Her breakdowns mid-battle weren't glitches, they were commentaries on what society demands from women, who have to be stronger than men just to be allowed to exist. Carl's domestic arc got its own essays, too. Some praising it as a nuanced portrait of machine moral development, others reading it as a damning take on male compartmentalization, a being who can murder and love in separate rooms with equal conviction. But perhaps the most telling response came not from scholars, but storytellers. In the years after Dark Fate, a mini-wave of AI-themed films and series began leaning less on tech spectacle and more on ethical ambiguity. Dev's Westworld Season 3 Archive After Yang. All these stories traded doomsday prophecy for slow, aching grief. Their machines weren't conquering, they were mirroring. Reflecting back everything we don't want to admit, our systems aren't failing. They're doing exactly what we designed them to do. For viewers wanting to walk deeper into these themes, a few lesser-known gems are worth seeking out. Film. Coherence 2013, a low-budget sci-fi parable about quantum entanglement, fractured identity, and the quiet horror of parallel selves. Aniera 2018, a haunting Swedish adaptation of a space poem, following a drifting ship as its AI caretaker slowly loses hope, mirroring our own. The Congress 2013, a live-action/animation hybrid that anticipates AI-generated identity theft, wrapped in a story about aging, memory, and commodification. Books. Autonomous by Annalee Newitz, a fast-paced cyberpunk novel that critiques intellectual property regimes and explores the emotional lives of indentured AIs. The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. Though not about AI directly, it offers a sobering look at how systems respond to global crisis and who gets sacrificed. Machines Like Me by Ian McEwan, a chilling alternate history where Alan Turing lives, and morality is put on trial by a humanoid robot that behaves more ethically than its human owners. The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin, a metaphysical sci-fi story about reality-shaping dreams and the ethics of fixing the world, eerily prescient in its vision of unintended consequences. Each of these works echoes the question Dark Fate leaves behind. What if the future isn't about who we become, but who we let go? Because every new resistance begins with someone willing to walk away from the story they were handed and write a new one. I understand what I took from you. When Carl says this, he isn't asking for forgiveness. He's not crying. He's not kneeling. He's simply stating what no one else in Dark Fate ever quite manages to: accountability. That line isn't the climax of the film, but it's the moment the film turns. Because Dark Fate isn't about saving the future. It's about reckoning with the past. And that one sentence, delivered by a machine that once destroyed a boy and now hangs drapes in silence, is the clearest map the film gives us. In a franchise once obsessed with changing destiny, Dark Fate does something more difficult. It accepts the damage. It acknowledges that some deaths don't heal. Some victories don't reverse loss. And some ghosts, like Sarah's rage or Carl's memory, live longer than timelines. And yet, the movie keeps moving. Just like Danny and Sarah in that final scene, 2 generations staring at a world that doesn't owe them hope, only momentum. There's no triumphant music. No victory speech. Just a dusty road and a look that says, we know what's coming. We've seen it. And we're going to fight anyway. If there's a new myth at the core of Dark Fate, it's not that machines will kill us. It's that systems will fail us. And the only thing more dangerous than being hunted is being forgotten. So here's the question the film leaves burning behind your eyes. What if John had lived? What if Danny had been told, like Sarah once was, that her only purpose was to birth a savior? What if Carl had never learned regret? Would have changed the outcome or only delayed it? That's the shadow play the movie runs in the background. It invites us to rewrite the film in our heads, then dares us to realize that every rewrite still ends in sacrifice. Because the real narrative shift Dark Fate performs isn't plot, it's perspective. It teaches us that legacy isn't passed down genetically. It's built painfully, stubbornly, one decision at a time. There's no sequel waiting in the wings. No post-credits resurrection. The Dark Fate wasn't just about the end of humanity. It was about the end of the myth of control. And what comes after isn't prophecy, it's responsibility. If there's one lingering thread to pull, it's this. What kind of future could we build if we stopped trying to go back and fix things and started staying long enough to understand what we broke? Now it's your turn. Drop a single emoji in the comments that captures how Terminator, Dark Fate made you feel. Because somewhere between fire and silence, that's where truth tends to live. And that's where resistance begins.